Black Ridge, written and narrated by Chad R. Martin. Prologue. The stars hung frozen, or so it seemed. Anchored in the void above Earth, they smoldered in timeless apathy, silent witnesses to eons past. Below, the pale blue curve of the planet turned with deliberate calm, draped in wisps of cloud and the faint pulse of civilization. For a heartbeat, everything lay frozen. Then the fabric of reality wavered. No flare, no roar, no kaleidoscope of impossible hues, only a subtle undulation, like a fingertip nudging the cosmos from within. The points of light around it sighed, stretching and folding inward. Space itself rippled in concentric waves. A fissure formed, not of matter or energy, but of something deeper, a rent in the dark. Beyond it lay nothing recognizable. No stars, no planets, no light. Only an abyss of such pure black it swallowed thought. The breach widened for exactly 3.2 seconds. Then something glided through. Triangular, perfectly symmetrical, matte black as the void. Its surface drank sunlight despite hovering over the bright hemisphere of Earth. No seams, no engines, no visible means of motion. It simply was. Hundreds of feet across, silent, observant. The tear in space collapsed. The universe sealed itself. The stars resumed their vigil as if nothing had occurred. All evidence vanished, save for the triangle. It tilted imperceptibly. A question. Then it drifted, not a surge, but a graceful shift. One moment it hovered in orbit, the next it descended. Below, life blazed on unknowing. Airliners traced glowing arcs, cargo ships drifted beneath moonlight, cities twinkled like terrestrial constellations. Billions slumbered or toiled, unaware that something new had arrived. The craft slipped through the upper atmosphere without flame, without roar, without a trace, like a stone vanishing beneath still water. Through cloud and haze it pressed downward, toward North America, toward the eastern mountains, toward a valley steeped in hidden history. Deep under granite peaks and old pines, another gaze was already fixed on the sky, a facility that did not exist. No name, no roads, no sign at all. To all but a few, the mountainside remained untouched wilds. Yet, 300 feet below, behind reinforced doors and biometric locks, hundreds labored. Screens glowed, servers thrummed, classified data flowing in silent torrents. Most believed they tracked foreign threats. Few knew the truth. Second Lieutenant Ethan Mercer sat alone in monitoring room 7. 26, 2 years out of the academy, sharp and uneasy. He nursed cold coffee and studied the wall-sized radar mosaic, a network of assets that officially did not exist. Orbital arrays, quantum sensors, deep space platforms. Night after night, the display stayed empty. Boredom reigned. Then, an alert, soft as a whisper, a single contact. No incoming trajectory, no crossing orbital zones. One moment, emptiness. The next, a new blip. His stomach tightened. He ran checks. All systems green. The blip persisted. It descended, swiftly, but with no detectable emissions. His throat went dry. He glanced at the sealed office above the floor, its light off, its occupant either asleep or fainting. He turned back to the screen. The object headed for the Appalachians, toward one of the off-limit zones, the forbidden grids. The computer tagged it. Anomalous contact, classification, unknown, pattern match, 97.4%. He knew that threshold, a harbinger of blackouts, secret briefings, people disappearing, questions erased. The blip blinked once, then plummeted. He reached for the red secure handset. For a moment, he only stared at it. Outside, the world lay in peaceful slumber. Inside, every instinct screamed that something fundamental had shifted. He lifted the receiver. The line clicked alive. A tired voice answered. Mercer swallowed, then whispered words unspoken in any manual, yet understood by all who sat in this room. "Sir, we have another one." Silence. Then the line went dead. Chapter 1. The Perfect Evening. The roar hit like a crack of thunder, rolling up from the stands in a wave of sound too massive for Black Ridge High Stadium to hold. For one electric heartbeat, the bleachers shook as fans leapt to their feet. Cowbells clanged in rapid succession, air horns blasted shrill blast. The marching band fumbled into a triumphant brass-blazing arrangement of Rocky Top, the notes ricocheting off the goalpost. On the field, players in black and gold jerseys sprinted toward midfield as though they had just clinched the state championship, not scraped out a regional win. Overhead, the scoreboard pulsed against the warm Tennessee night. Black Ridge Bears 28, Carter County 27. 3 seconds earlier, sophomore kicker Ethan Wilkes had planted his cleats, drawn his leg back, and sent a 43-yard field goal arcing just high enough, barely skimming the crossbar to split the uprights. Now half the town surged across the turf, clamoring to hoist him on their shoulders. Coach Kurt Hawkins stood at the 50-yard line, hands on hips, grin stretching across a face as weathered as old leather. At 50 years old, he still cut an imposing figure. 6'3", broad-shouldered, the muscles of his youth lingering beneath the loose polo. Sweat-dark strands of brown and gray hair clung to his forehead, damp with both exertion and the humid September air. The brim of his well-worn Bears cap cast a shadow over creases etched by decades of sunlight, stadium lights, and 1,000 sideline screams. 2 linebackers barreled into him from behind. "Coach, did you see that kick?" one shouted, eyes bright as the field lights. Kurt threw back his head and laughed, the sound deep in his chest. "See it? Son, I nearly had a heart attack." The boys howled. Another player jabbed a finger at the lit-up scoreboard. "We won!" Kurt shook his head with mock solemnity. "Nope, Ethan won. The rest of you spent 3 quarters trying your absolute best to lose." More laughter rippled through the huddle as the stray water bottle pinged off Kurt's shoulder. "Coach, I'm serious," he said, voice rich with amusement. "Y'all racked up more penalties than a prison yard." They clustered around him, still chuckling, the very thing they loved about him. Kurt never hollered just to be loud. He never let football loom larger than life or forgot that these were still kids. Principal Beth McKenzie sidled up through the crowd. "Speech?" she asked, voice faint above the jubilation. Kurt let out a dramatic sigh. "Oh, Lord, I hate speeches." Instantly, the players began chanting, "Speech, speech, speech." He rubbed his face, stifling a grin. "Fine, but if it's terrible, that's on y'all." They parted to make room as he climbed onto a battered wooden bench. Stadium lights gleamed off a sea of faces, parents flushed with pride, students hoisting homemade signs, band members still gripping tubas, cheerleaders in glittering uniforms, a few deputies lingering at the edge, even some Carter County bands who had come to congratulate the victors. For a moment, Kurt simply drank it in. His people, his town, his kids. Then he pointed at Ethan, whose grin rivaled the scoreboard's glow. "All right, first things first. Somebody get Ethan home safe tonight." The crowd chuckled. "After that kick, every grandma in Black Ridge is going to try to adopt him." Ethan laughed, shoulders shaking. Kurt waited until the laughter died down. His eyes softened. "You boys did something tonight most folks don't understand." Silence fell like a soft blanket. The only sound was distant traffic on the highway. "You kept fighting." He tapped the scoreboard. "That number up there, it doesn't tell the whole story." A few players nodded. "You got knocked down." Another nod. "You made mistakes." A ripple of self-deprecating laughter. "A whole lot of mistakes," someone admitted. "But every time something went wrong, you got back up." His voice deepened. "That's football. More importantly, that's life." The hush was profound now. Hundreds of ears straining for every word. Most folks think winning means being the strongest." He shook his head slowly. "Nope. Winning means getting back up one more time than life knocks you down." A handful of parents burst into applause. Kurt pointed at himself, ribs creaking with a grin. "Trust me. Look at me. I ain't exactly the poster child for perfection." "Coach," someone jeered affectionately. "That's right," Kurt agreed. "I forget where I put my truck keys 3 times a week." "4," a teacher called out. "Thanks, Linda. Appreciate the support." Laughter bubbled through the crowd again, but Kurt's tone grew softer. "Here's what I've learned. Nobody remembers how perfect you were. They remember whether you showed up, whether you kept going, whether you were the kind of person others could count on." He paused, letting the words sink in. Then he smiled wide. "I'm proud of every one of you. Whether you scored 3 touchdowns or spent the whole night blocking for someone else, every single one of you matters." Applause swelled like a tidal wave. Kurt hopped off the bench. "Now, go celebrate before I start sounding inspirational." The eruption was immediate. Players vaulted forward, engulfing him in hugs. Someone tipped a cooler overhead, and a cascade of icy water drenched Kurt from head to toe. He emitted an unprintable roar as the stadium erupted in laughter, the night air alive with joy. For those few minutes, every mistake, every penalty, every second of doubt disappeared. In the glow of the lights, life felt perfect. An hour later, the crowd had thinned. The lights around Black Ridge cast a soft golden glow over the rolling hills, and the scent of cut grass lingered like a promise in the cool night breeze. Kurt eased his weathered Ford pickup, its faded blue paint chipped at the door jambs and the tailgate rattling ever so slightly, down the narrow expanse of Main Street. With the windows rolled all the way down, he let the cool autumn breeze drift through the cab, carrying with it the faint, acrid tang of wood smoke from distant chimneys and the sweet, grassy perfume of freshly cut hay lying in neat rows along the fields. Black Ridge lay nestled in a valley shadowed by the dark, undulating ridges of the Appalachians, an unremarkable stretch of pavement for anyone just passing through. One blinking traffic light stood guard at the crossroads. One squat courthouse, its gray stone walls streaked by nearly a century of rain. A scattering of brick storefronts, some with peeling awnings, some with flower pots lining the thresholds. A handful of white steepled churches whose spires pierced the sky like silent sentinels watching over their flock. But to Kurt and the 2,000 souls who called Black Ridge home, it was everything. Beyond the last strip of asphalt, rolling forest unfurled in every direction, tangled with golden oaks and crimson maples. Family farms, some tilled by the same name on the mailbox for 3 or 4 generations, dotted the countryside, their weathered barns standing tall against the horizon. Labyrinthine 2-lane roads wound deep between hills and hollows, where cell service was as fickle as the wind and the mood of the mountains. At the heart of town, the courthouse, built of mossy limestone on a crisp October morning decades ago, loomed over the square. Its clock tower with hands forged in antique brass still released its clear, sonorous chime at every hour, echoing against the rooftops. Directly across the street, Dawson's Pharmacy displayed a neat row of glass apothecary jars in its front window. Next door, Carla's Tavern exhaled the low hum of laughter and clinking glasses, and Whitaker Hardware, with its faded red door, promised everything a makeshift farmer might need. Here, people remembered your name before you even stepped inside. Kurt offered a wave as he rolled past. Dozens of heads turned, dozens of hands lifting in greeting. A ragtag group of teenagers lounging by the courthouse steps spotted him. "Coach!" they shouted in unison. He returned their call with 2 short blasts of his horn that rattled the nearby streetlight. Further down, Mrs. Hollister kneeled beside her flower cart, brimming with chrysanthemums and asters, watering each blossom with care. Kurt slowed to a crawl. "Evening, Martha," he called. She brushed a gray curl behind her ear and looked up with a warm smile. "You boys pulled it off again." "Barely," he admitted, easing the truck to a stop. The soft crunch of gravel filled the quiet. She laughed, the sound as bright as wind chimes. "Still counts." "It does." He watched her tend to her blooms a moment longer before resuming his drive. A half block on, he swung into Murphy's service station. Beneath the flickering neon sign, the old wooden pump handles gleamed in the last light of dusk. Inside, Billy the clerk had already laid Kurt's favorite cigar, a Cuban mild, across the counter next to a stack of local racing forms and a jar of Tootsie Rolls he always left untouched. "Figured you'd be celebrating tonight," Billy said with a crooked grin, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. Kurt chuckled as he swiped his card. "You're encouraging bad habits, Billy." Billy leaned forward, conspiratorial. "I'm supporting local tradition." By the time Kurt pulled back onto the road, 15 minutes had slipped by in conversation. The thrilling last-minute touchdown that sealed the home team's victory, the mayor's plan to repair the old bridge over Indian Creek, Mrs. Thompson missing goat that reportedly turned up in a neighbor's chicken coop, and a heated debate about whether the Volunteers still had a shot at the playoffs. In Black Ridge, a quick errand was never just an errand, and Kurt wouldn't have it any other way. Out here, the world's frantic pace felt miles away. The old churches still rang their bells on Sunday mornings. The courthouse clock still chimed at noon. Neighbors still looked out for each other over split rail fences and front porch swings. People still remembered names. As Kurt turned off Main onto the narrow county road that climbed toward the Hawkins Ridge, the golden glow of streetlights and storefronts receded behind him. Ahead, the black silhouette of Tennessee's hills stretched beneath an indigo sky spangled with stars. The perfect evening was only beginning. The road shoulder lights flickered out one by one as Kurt steered his truck farther from Black Ridge. The town's warm glow faded in his rearview mirror until only a handful of distant pinpricks of light remained scattered among the undulating hills. Ahead, the county road wove through narrow valleys and gentle rounded ridges draped in oak, hickory, and pine. These weren't the jagged peaks of the Appalachian spine farther east, but rather old summits, their silhouettes softened by time, rolling beneath the sky so densely jeweled with stars it felt boundless. Kurt leaned his left arm out the window and let the cool September air flood the cab. The sharp, sweet tang of freshly cut hay drifted in from a nearby pasture, mingling with the faint curl of wood smoke drifting on the night breeze. Somewhere in the dark ditches, a chorus of crickets sang, a sound so familiar it resonated in his bones. He inhaled deeply. Home. The truck's tires crunched over the long gravel driveway that curved through 30 acres of pasture and dense woodlands. Massive oaks, older than the town itself, stood like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches arcing against the moonlit sky. Their bark, rough and fissured, seemed to absorb the soft glow of the headlights before it vanished behind him. At the driveway's crest, Kurt eased the truck to a halt in front of the barn dominium perched atop the ridge. Moonlight shimmered off the metal roof of the black and gray structure, while warm porch lamps cast golden pools of light across wide wooden boards. A wraparound porch stretched around two sides of the house, furnished with rocking chairs that creaked softly in the breeze, a porch swing suspended by iron chains, and a scatter of Adirondack chairs arranged as though awaiting long, rambling conversations and mugs of steaming coffee. To one side, the workshop's roll-up door bore the marks of countless projects, planes for smoothing lumber, the stubborn scratch of a welder's torch, and the occasional masterpiece no one had asked for. Behind the house, an outdoor kitchen invited memories of summer cookouts, a massive stone fire pit ringed by sturdy logs, two smokers puffing faint tendrils of smoke into the night, and several grills poised for slow-cooked ribs or brisket. A cedar pergola sheltered a hot tub whose bubbling jets whispered lullabies to the stars above. Every element was arranged to capture the panoramic view of hills that stretched away into velvety darkness. More than once, his son Ryan had teased that Kurt had built a private resort. Kurt had just laughed and reminded him that resorts overcharged and seldom served barbecue this good. He killed the engine, and for a heartbeat, the world fell silent. Then, from inside the barn dominium, a bark tore through the stillness. Then another, and the unmistakable clatter of furniture as it was pushed aside. Kurt chuckled. Here we go. The front door burst open, and Sammy launched himself off the porch like a missile. The black lab spaniel mix weighed every ounce of his 70 pounds for the impact, though at full speed he moved as though he were only 20. Sammy barreled into Kurt's shins with joyful force, nearly toppling him backward. Easy! Kurt laughed, bending to ruffle the dog's sleek coat. Sammy's solid black fur was shot through with a gray beard around his muzzle, as if an old philosopher's soul dwelled inside a hunting hound. His tail thumped the porch floor in rapid percussion. Good game? Kurt asked, as Sammy barked once as if to confirm. A slower shape lumbered out of the doorway. Diesel, the basset hound, stepping into the night with all the urgency of a civil servant on his last day before retirement. His long ears flapped in time with each deliberate footfall, his face bearing the eternal expression of disappointment someone had closed his favorite diner. He approached Kurt, craned his head upward, released a single low woof, and promptly sat. Kurt crouched, scratching between Diesel's drooping ears. Good to see you too, buddy. Long day? Diesel leaned into the scratch, exhaling a theatrical sigh that dissolved into another. Meanwhile, Sammy nudged Kurt's hand, pressed against his leg, and made a determined effort to lick his face. Okay, settle down. The trio moved toward the porch. Halfway up the steps, Kurt paused and turned to drink in the view. Silver moonlight washed over the rolling hills, picking out the silhouettes of oak crowns in the velvet darkness of pine-shaded hollows. The valley yawned for miles with no hint of tail lights, no distant city glow, only Tennessee's wild hush enfolding him. At 50, he still marveled how life had slowed from frantic ball games and parent meetings and work deadlines to this, the gentle rhythm of days measured in sunrises and the turning of seasons. He stepped inside the barn dominium where warm lamplight glowed off knotty wood walls and stone accents that framed generous windows looking out on the night. The scent of cedar and fresh coffee lingered in the air. Everywhere he looked, family photographs told a story. Ryan and Megan beaming beside a smoker large enough for an army. Lauren and Josh at Christmas with their kids clustered around a tree. Jess and Kurt grinning like champions at the end of another semester. Shelves held snapshots of fishing trips and birthday cakes smeared on tiny faces, grandchildren posing proudly next to fish half their size, evidence of a life lived deeply. Some folks imagined a man alone on 30 acres must be lonely, but Kurt found that notion almost comical. Ryan called at least every other day. Lauren's check-ins bordered on surveillance. Jess texted at all hours with questions about world history or the latest tech or the survivability of raccoons during a zombie outbreak. Grandchildren treated Hawkins Ridge as a personal playground. Teddy bears and toy trucks still nestled under chairs, a stuffed dinosaur peeking from a bookshelf, snacks tucked in cabinets just for them. With Sammy curled at his feet and Diesel nestled in his favorite spot by the fireplace, Kurt felt the familiar warmth of contentment settle in his chest, not the restless spark of ambition or longing, but a deep, quiet fulfillment. Outside, beyond the windows, the hills slept under a blanket of stars, and the old oak swayed in the soft night breeze. Somewhere beyond those distant ridges, something impossible was already stirring toward Black Ridge. But Kurt Hawkins remained blissfully unaware, wrapped in the rarest kind of happiness. As Kurt sank into his worn leather recliner, its cushions sighing beneath him, the soft glow of the table lamp cast dancing shadows across the living room. The silence was broken by the faint buzz of his phone vibrating on the side table. He smiled before glancing at the screen. Ryan, like clockwork, Friday nights after the last whistle of Black Ridge's football games, every single week. He tapped accept. Instantly, the display erupted in cheerful chaos. Dad! A pint-sized face pressed so close to the camera that only one enormous blue-green eye filled the frame. Kurt laughed. Well, hello there, Lily. The angle jerked away. His granddaughter's freckled cheeks and eager grin reappeared. How'd you know it was me? Years of detective work, he replied, offering an invisible magnifying glass. The camera spun. First the overhead fan slicing lazy arcs in the lamplight, then a brass lamp gleaming on a side table, then half of Diesel's golden flank, and finally Ryan's amused face filled the screen. Sorry. Looks like you're live streaming a tornado there. Ryan rolled his eyes. You should see dinner time. Megan's soft voice floated in from off screen. I heard that. Love you too, honey. Kurt waved at empty space. The camera settled Ryan on the sagging couch, Lily and her little brother Ben bouncing behind him like mini acrobats. Kurt's chest warmed. Seeing them never got old. How was the game? Ryan's grin was immediate. Well, we won. By one. By one. I heard Ethan kicked it from 40 plus. 43. Nice. Kurt leaned back as they slipped into easy chatter. Football highlights, work updates, Thanksgiving plans. Ryan mentioned bringing the kids up to Hawkins Ridge next weekend. Ben's shout cut in. Can we ride the four-wheeler? No, Megan called. Can we fish? Probably. Can we make s'mores? Absolutely. Triumphant whoops rang out. Kurt beamed. See, somebody around here appreciates me. At last, Megan stepped into view, her face aglow. We appreciate you. You're only saying that because I smoke brisket on Sundays. That's at least 70% of it, Ryan teased. They laughed. After a few more minutes, Ryan checked the clock. We should get these two to bed. Probably. Then he looked back at Kurt. Dad? Yeah. Proud of you. Kurt blinked. What for? The books, the coaching, the life. Kurt felt something swell inside. Thanks, son. The screen went dark, leaving the room bathed in gentle lamplight. He set the phone down, but before he could lean back, it buzzed again. Lauren. Her face filled the frame, perfectly lit and composed. Everything about this call felt organized. Dad? Lauren? He grinned. You haven't left the ridge in 3 days. Well, that's not true. It is. Well, I coached today. That doesn't count. Football is basically your second home. He waved at the camera. There it is. Where? The annual lecture on aging coaches and why they never leave. Lauren rolled her eyes. You need to socialize. I socialize. You talk to farmers. They're people. Barely. Her tone was warm despite the tease. They drifted through familiar topics, the kids, Josh's new construction contract, a school fundraiser, Ridge gossip. At one point, she narrowed her eyes. What did you eat today? Suspicion prickled him. Food? What kind of food? The edible kind. Dad, I had eggs. And? He hesitated. There may have been leftover ribs. At breakfast? Technically. She shook her head, amused. You live like a mountain man. I live like a king with cholesterol. They laughed together, no judgment, only affection. Before she hung up, her voice softened. Love you. Love you too, kiddo. Don't step all night riding. No promises. The screen dimmed. Kurt sighed, setting the phone down. 3 seconds later, it rang again. Jess. His youngest dorm room filled the screen. Textbooks strewn across the bed, empty coffee cups on the desk, a laptop glowing in the background. Before you ask, yes, I need money. I am so surprised right now, he feigned in mock shock. You always know. Because you're predictable. I'm mysterious. You opened with a funding request. Efficiency? He laughed. How much? Jess grimaced. Don't get mad. I may have accidentally purchased 2 textbooks. How do you accidentally buy textbooks? Well, there was a button. You clicked it. Multiple clicks, maybe. He shook his head. Jess, in my defense, education is expensive. Uh-huh. And technically, it's an investment. And one day I'll be rich. Probably. So, you know I'll send it. Relief washed her face. You're the best. Flattery will get you everywhere. Well, I am your favorite. I don't have favorites. Exact words parents use when they do. His laughter was loud and fond. Unlike the others, Jess's mind spiraled through topics. Novels, tech trends, a wild debate about old batteries. She launched into her research project, jargon flying. He understood snippets, but he savored her excitement. By the time she yawned, the evening felt full. I should probably study. Probably. She paused. Dad? Yeah? Her voice trembling slightly. Thanks. For what? For always answering. His heart tightened. He offered a steady smile. Always. Love you. Love you too, baby. The call ended. Silence reclaimed the room. Sammy stretched before laying on his side to sleep on the rug. Diesel snored softly by the fireplace. Outside, a breeze rustled oak leaves, their silhouettes flickering on the window. Kurt remained in his recliner, yet felt deeply connected. His children, thriving, independent, were woven into the very fabric of his life. The photographs on the mantel weren't relics of the past, but promises of tomorrow's calls, next weekend visits, and countless shared moments to come. He rose, lifting a crystal tumbler of amber bourbon, its smoky aromas curling upward. Crossing to the back porch, he settled into a wooden chair. The night stretched before him, rolling hills bathed in starlight, the fire pit ready to spark, the hush of the world at peace. He inhaled the cool air, raised his glass, and let the quiet contentment settle in. The perfect ending to a perfect day. Or so he thought. By 11 o'clock, Hawkins Ridge had slipped into its nightly reverie. The rolling hills stood as inky silhouettes beneath a canopy of stars so bright they seemed to pulse with their own old heartbeat. A pale silver moon hovered just above the ridge, its light brushing the treetops with a soft glow. A crisp draft carried the first real breath of autumn, leaf musk, distant wood smoke, and the faint tang of dew settling on grass. Kurt stepped onto the back porch, the weathered boards creaking underfoot. In his left hand, he held a leather-bound notebook, its corners dog-eared. In his right, a heavy tumbler of bourbon, amber liquid catching the moonlight, and tucked under his arm was his laptop, its cool metal case already hinting at the warm glow it would soon cast. Behind him came Sammy, the lanky lab spaniel mix in perpetual motion. And trailing Sammy was, of course, Diesel, the basset hound, waddling along with his long ears bouncing. Diesel never wanted to miss anything that might involve food or the possibility of a scrap of cigar ash. At the edge of the porch, a circle of blackened stones marked the fire pit, hungry for flame. Kurt knelt, arranging kindling among stacked oak logs. In a few moments, a slender match flared, and then the logs caught, crackling tongues of orange and red bursting upward, sending silver sparks spiraling toward stars. The scent of burning wood rose warm and smoky. He eased down into one of the wild Adirondack chairs, its cedar slats smooth from seasons of rain and sun. This was his favorite hour. Not crowded stadiums cheering a touchdown, not the sterile hush of an empty study, not even the laughter at family gatherings. But this, the hush that follows sunset, broken only by the crackle of firewood. The slow drift of smoke, and the gentle clink of ice in his glass. He reached into his pocket, produced a stout cigar, and clipped its end with a soft click. A single flick of a lighter set the tip aglow, a molten ember melting tobacco into sweet heat. He drew in a breath of smoke, letting the scent of cocoa and spice unfurl in his lungs. For several minutes he simply sat. The fire's warmth seeped through his jacket, the night pressed in, cool against his face. Somewhere below, a river murmured faintly. Above, a canopy of stars wheeled silently. Then he opened the laptop. A pale rectangle of light glowed in the darkness, and the title materialized in bold type. The Shadow of Sul Kalu, his newest endeavor, an interweaving of historical fiction, spine-tingling horror, and the rich tapestry of Appalachian folklore. He leaned forward, fingertips poised over the keyboard, and began to type. The Cherokee called him Sul Kalu. Some translated the name as He Has Them Slanting. Others whispered Judakula. Still others simply spoke of the great giant of the mountains. He was said to stand taller than the tallest man, stronger than any grizzly. His body was thick with long, matted hair. Moss and bark clung to his arms like living tattoos. Legends claim that with a single stride he could cross entire valleys. The old stories named him Lord of the Game, Master of Animals, Protector of the Hunt. He who watched from the depths of the forest and decided whether hunters returned with meat or not at all. His footprints, enormous and impossibly deep, were said to be pressed into stone itself. Even centuries later, when strange, oversized tracks appeared in mountain crevices, some dismissed them. Most, however, remembered the old tales. Kurt paused, lifted his tumbler to his lips, and let the whiskey burn its sweet path down his throat. He reread the paragraph. It was a touch dramatic, yet folklore demanded spectacle. Behind him, the fire popped, sending a spray of orange embers drifting upward to vanish against the Milky Way. Beyond the firelight, the ridge rolled into shadowy hills that dissolved into forest. Kurt smiled, fingers hovering. He loved his work, not because he truly believed each towering beast or phantom deer, but because legends bore the fingerprints of human fear and wonder. A time before science rendered the world predictable. Bigfoot, ghosts, monsters. They were stories as much as they were warnings. Their mysteries whispered of places science had yet to tread. He tapped a fresh paragraph into being. Some researchers would one day align Sul Kalu with the modern Bigfoot archetype. The parallels were uncanny. Gargantuan stature, inhuman strength, a trail of massive footprints, an elusive presence at civilization's edge, vanishing as swiftly as it appeared. Perhaps these were the same old fears given new names. Or perhaps human imagination simply retold the same tale under different skies. Kurt nodded in quiet approval. He took another deliberate sip of bourbon, enough to warm the chill creeping in, and let the embers of his cigar glow steady and orange. Everything felt in perfect balance. Firelight, smoke, story, silence. Then something shifted. His fingers stilled above the keys. He frowned, listening intently. The fire crackled as before. The bourbon tasted unchanged. The autumn breeze still brushed his skin, but a void. He lowered his glass. Normally, from this vantage, a chorus of crickets would envelop the night, the rhythmic chirping a steady heartbeat. Frogs by the pond would join in, their deep calls echoing off the hillside. Nearby, an owl might hoot, a leaf might rustle. Tonight, nothing. He glanced toward the forest edge. The oaks stood motionless, their broad leaves frozen mid-whisper. No rustling underbrush, no distant coyote yaps. An absolute hush had fallen, as though the world itself held its breath. Sammy twitched at his side, ears pricked. Diesel sat up, droopy eyes fixed on the edge of the clearing. Kurt's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with an uncanny certainty that something had arrived. He rose, glass in hand, and peered into the blackness beyond the firelight. The trees stared back, still as carved wood. Above, the stars burned in shocking clarity, every pinprick of light more distinct than before. The ridge felt suspended, paused on the cusp of revelation. Uncertainty pulled in his chest. He listened once more. Silence, perfect and unbroken. Then somewhere past the tree line, something moved. A soft, impossible cadence, like weight brushing against undergrowth. Kurt closed the laptop with slow deliberation, set his bourbon on the armrest, and drew in a steady breath of smoke and cool night air. Leaning forward, he fixed his gaze on the forest's inky edge. And in the darkness, something watched back.